Welcome into Hoops Forum, a production of Radius Athletics and a quick timeout podcast. I'm Tony Miller, and back with me this week is Randy Sherman. Big thanks to our sponsors over at 323 Sports. We've been telling you for a long time here about 323 Sports' famous $55 team packs, and they actually have an equally as popular $99 team pack, which gives you more customization and includes some even nicer pieces of apparel, including sweatshirts for these colder months. To find out more about what 323 Sports can do for your program, visit 323sports.com, or you can contact a sales rep at sales@323sports.com. They'll be sure to do it right for your basketball program. Randy, a tweet this week on Twitter got both of our attention, and I wanted to ask you a few maybe questions about the tweet, about some of the responses that coaches gave in the reply. Talking today kind of about some of the frustrations that coaches have, but don't necessarily want this to be just kind of an airing of frustrations,
Mm-hmm.
but also maybe some ideas for ways that you handled and maybe some things that you've discussed with the coaches that you work with your ramp program for
Okay.
handling some of these common frustrations that coaches have. I'll just start with this without too much explanation. Let me just ask you
Mm-hmm.
personally, like some of your biggest, maybe one or two of your biggest frustrations back when you coached.
Well, shout out to Coach Matt Hackenberg, doing a good job on Twitter and at Coach Hack Go, I think is his handle, and he's a friend of mine. Was a former Rant member, is a former Rant member, and spoken with him a lot. So, um, yeah, he asked a question about coaching frustrations, and honestly, many of the ones that I read and were obvious to to me in my experience as well. I think I'd say some of the bigger frustrations. We win a game, but not everyone's happy. That's kind of a letdown. You maybe even win a big game, a playoff game, or you upset a favored team or something like that, and there's jubilation. Sure, like a lot of people are very happy and excited, but there's maybe one or two stakeholders that aren't, or a handful that aren't. That was always frustrating to me. um, I think my answer to the question that was posed on Twitter was, just sort of all things around officiating. Like, I just it's a topic that's given way too much oxygen by coaches, parents, fans, media. Like, just I just find it just a. I mean, you got to have officials in a game, obviously, to enforce the rules and keep order. But I don't know. It just seems like it's just way too much attention by everyone, from coaches to players to fans and beyond. I always found that just like a frustrating part of the, like, just kind of annoyance, maybe be the better word, on not necessarily bad officiating annoying me, but just like how often it's talked about, and like, just golly, like, anyway. Maybe one more would be, how how that in the season to keep a level of competitiveness among all of our players, even those that say maybe aren't the minutes they want.
Yeah.
Those
Let
are
me
some
start.
coaching frustrations I felt.
Yeah, we'll talk about kind of each of those there. Let me start with the officials. Um, so
Okay.
not necessarily uh, even a solution. I think that maybe you correct me, give you your thoughts on this, but maybe
Hmm.
personality can impact not just this one, but maybe even all of them.
Sure.
Um, I know that reading through those responses, previous interactions or previous circumstances can heavily influence maybe how somebody thinks about it. And you talked about the attention that's given to it, but even the interactions with officials and positive, negative that
Yeah.
you've had and suggestions for. But what would you suggest, even to younger coaches? I think a lot of what we do and how we respond is often shaped by things that we have seen or observed or even had experiences that we've had in the past, but
Yeah.
just general thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, full disclosure, I've gotten technicals. I've gotten you know, my temper has gotten elevated with officials, so I'm no saint by any means. So um, the the as, as I look back to, if I could speak to the younger me, the young coach, um, who's eager, competitive, wanted to make his name in the coaching profession, um, want to win. I would say that that sort of like too much emotion was guiding my behavior and not enough sort of measure and discipline. So that's oftentimes what I see with coaches who have negative interactions with officials, is that they're just hysterical and their emotions are in control, and they're sort of the fight or flight mechanism. The fight mechanism is fully engaged during competition, and they're almost like a subhuman creature that's operating on a very primal level. That I just that that's part of human nature, but it's an ugly part of it. And if I would speak to the younger me, I would say kind of get control of your animal brain and behave rationally.
Some of the observations I've had, I too have not mastered this, but typically your players will also follow suit with how you are emotionally behaving,
And your
and,
fans.
and the fans, and that can quickly snowball into something that you don't necessarily want to happen. I've also kind of just being aware of, I probably care more and talk more to the officials and am emotionally charged even more when I feel it's a game that's even closer or within our grasp or something that matters more.
Yeah,
And that can almost, I think that probably that can almost be the opposite of what you actually, if you were to take a step back, would want of yourself in a
good point.
situation like that. So just being aware of I don't even recognize that I'm doing it sometimes. So I think being aware of something like that. And
Yeah, one of the points that was made as a counterpoint was if say there's two coaches in the game. Obviously, I'm the coaching my team, you're coaching yours, and I have elected as a coach to take a stoic, laissez-faire approach with the refs. I'm just gonna like kind of be whatever calls they make. It is what it is. I can't control that. I'm not gonna. I think there's a mindset that if I don't berate or badger or lobby officials, I'm ceding competitive ground to my counterpart who maybe is. I find that unfortunate that you would feel backed into a corner to be a, a jerk to officials by necessity, because you're losing a competitive chess piece by not. So I would say that I don't know that there's a real need to feel that way, but I guess I could see how, maybe you see this coach down here just intimidating or bullying officials and finally gets his way, and like, yeah, like, well, that worked for him, so I better do the same. I find that unfortunate, but maybe that's a plausible tactic that some have feel forced to use.
yeah, it's disappointing if that's something that you do feel like you have to, but I just feel like a lot of us say that we want to be transformational, and the way that we go about doing that is by demonstrating what we want to be behavior wise, or the way we handle situations that are out of our control to our players, but then we think that that is not applicable to our own behavior
Yeah,
because of the competition piece or the piece that needs that we feel to be there in order to win the game. And I just, there's some hypocrisy there that I
sure.
don't necessarily in the long term think that it may win you a game, but in the long run, it may cause you to have some problems when it comes to the ability for you to transform or be a tool in transforming the life of the player that you said that you wanted to devote their coaching
Here's
to. So
here's what I wanted. Here's what I wanted above anything else. I wanted all the stakeholders in our basketball program, me, my staff, the players, their parents, who the players and parents are probably the last people to convince of what I'm about to say. But I wanted all the stakeholders in our program to have the belief that our work determines the outcome of the game.
yeah,
That our practice determines the outcome of the game. Our systems, our execution, our discipline, our teamwork, our culture, all the work we put into all those domains, that's what determines the outcome of the game. Now, if I give oxygen to officiating, I lend credence to this the conspiracy theory brain that we already kind of have of like the refs are out to get us, we never get a fair shot, we're getting cheated. So I give oxygen to the idea that something other than our merit and our efforts determines the outcome of the game. It's a conspiracy. The official union is conspiring against me or something. Like, you get what I'm saying? Like that I just didn't want to give it any oxygen because I didn't want my behavior to give anyone in the program, players, parents, anything other than what we do in our practice gym and how well we teach it and execute it determines the outcome.
yeah, yep, for sure. That idea of transformational coaching kind of leads me into this next one.
Okay.
You alluded to it, but
Yeah.
you've got 12 to 15 people on your team, and obviously all 15 are going to have a unique experience.
Yes.
And how can I help as a coach in helping them have a positive experience? And I use the term positive rather than good or bad, because I do think that sometimes what we view as either being good or bad may or might not actually be helpful or not helpful to our overall growth as a person. So how can I, within the resources that I have or the things that I can control that you just talked about there, how can I help each player on the team have a positive experience?
Man, I think this is when I reflect on seasons, the biggest frustration and sort of regret, that I can't say that all of the players had a positive experience that I coached, and I don't think any coach could honestly say that. And if they can, then get them on your podcast and talk to them and feature them and get them to speak to how they managed to do that. I would say I can recall a few examples of some bench players and some players who maybe didn't get the minutes that they wanted, still had a good time, still had an enjoyable experience. But I would say that was the exception and not the rule. It was almost like you've got a team, but within that team you've got a sort of a caste system of the players who feel valued and contributing and those that don't. I think I'll just give you some efforts that I tried to address this. Now they didn't all work, but the way we practiced in terms of sort of involving everyone and not having this like, okay, it's green versus white, or starters versus backups all the time in practice, and creating these caste systems. We tried to give reps to everybody, coaching to everyone, balance out groups and really compete, where on a 4-on-4, 3-on-3 session, there might be a starter with a bench player, with a deep bench player, and that's their team, and they're working together in practice to I think back to a lot of the teams I was on, and maybe mistakes I made when I was a young coach, was there was like this caste system in our program of starters, backups, or these are the minutes, and neither group felt like that could change. Like if I was a starter, that was just coach picked the starters. That's going to be that no matter what. If I'm a deep bench player, that's not changing. So I really try to at least give our practice environment the feeling that we're all involved in becoming a good team. But let's be honest, when the game night is where we're going to determine happiness or sadness or anger or pleasure, and a minutes can't be equal. I also think back to some of the players who had a deep bench role on our team on game night, but who handled it well and were positive. There was something sort of like in their personality that helped them that like I didn't really have much to do with. Like their parents were aware of their son or daughter's skill set. They didn't have a lack of awareness of that. So did the player. Just like didn't have this belief that I'm as good as the starters, but I'm just getting cheated, robbed. Coach doesn't like me. The world is conspiring against me. So there was some element there that like I don't necessarily feel all that responsible for. That may sound like I'm distancing from the problem, but like there was some personality traits of some players who handled that well. That I think that's something to tap into and think about more of like the person has got to be able to see their abilities clearly and embrace the role that they have, even if it's not star player starting minutes.
I've had a couple conversations about culture, including some that you and I have had here. And I think that this is a key piece in your culture of the whole program. And you talked about already one of the practical applications for you as a coach that's creating that practice plan, not just switching up teams, but I think also when you do practice with those small sided games and everybody is contributing and everybody feels like they're improving and getting the opportunity and they get a shot to contribute or to at least prove themselves to be able to be that person that plays. That has proven to be or create a different tone in our practices than back when I wasn't a part of a team that did that, where it was more of just we all go through the same drills and a kid never feels like he gets a chance in something that resembles a game to show that he can contribute.
Yeah.
And then there was an aspect that we actually started talking about it and their roles on the team and how they do help and contribute. And I know everybody does want to contribute on game night, but that's not possible. And you mentioned it, and I heard a coach give a practical piece of advice. He does at the very beginning of the game. Everybody sits down in the same room. They all get out a piece of paper. Nobody writes their name at the top of it, but they say, how many minutes do you think that you should get this year? How many minutes do you think that you're going to get this year? And then he has everybody turn in that piece of paper and tallies up the number. And what you'll find is frequently that number far exceeds the amount of
it's like 4
minutes.
games worth of minutes. Yeah.
Right. And then he does the exact same thing again with shots. How many shots do you think that you're going to get? All right. Well, we took, let's just say
Grinnell.
Yeah.
We're not going
there's 150 shots on the list. And you look back at your stats last year and you're like, well, we only took 60. This isn't possible. It's impossible for this to happen. And it's not like shattering expectations or their feelings at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
But like creating a sense of reality of what is this actually going to potentially look like for us as a team and then for you individually.
Yeah, it's a lesson in scarcity, right? Like these things that we all want are not an infinite supply. So how are we going to navigate that as a team? I would say too that like one question that I ran across recently that I liked, and I've started using it with the coaches I speak to, would be, okay, your answer to this question is always going to be minutes. What do you want out of your experience on the team? More minutes, more play, I want to be a valuable contributor. Something way of saying more, playing time, right? Then the follow-up question would be, well, okay, given, but what do you want if you can't get what you want?
Mm.
What do you want from being on this team if you can't get what you said you wanted? Like, what's your maybe second choice, right? Like, uh, good memories, a camaraderie, fellowship with my friends or whatever. Like I can give you those things, right? I can give you those things, but I maybe can't give you the your number one choice of things that you want, but I can give you. So what do you want if you can't get what you want?
Mm-hmm. That's good.
And then reflect. Did that happen after the end of the season? Did you have a good experience? Were there good memories? Were there uh you know fun times on the bus, at team parties, at away at tournaments and things like that? Like, did you leave with those things? And you maybe didn't get everything you wanted, but um yeah. But let's be honest, like that's still very challenging.
Yeah, yeah. The whole thing is very, very difficult to balance, and I do think that if you're alert to this, you improve over time. There's not necessarily this magic formula that you put in place,
Yeah.
but it does need to be something that I do feel like you need to improve on as the years go on. This one is maybe a subset of that,
Hmm.
and I don't want it to feel like if you're watching, it's not do my players not care, as in they didn't get what they wanted and now they don't care. But
Hmm.
where I've faced this and the frustrations that I've had, even this year, and I understand it, but I don't want to give the understanding away right away. But there's can be at times a sense or this kind of feeling that there's some apathy on the part of the players,
Hmm.
or maybe like a lack of focus in whether that's a practice or preparing for a scout or execution of the plan. But I've heard coaches voice those types of frustrations. Have you felt this, and how do you address this?
Yeah. I hear this a lot. I don't buy it all the time. I really don't. Maybe that's just based on my own experience. I'll plead guilty to um, having coached in a few environments during my career where basketball was a really big deal in the school and in the community. So there was lots of motivation, focus, attention. So yeah, the players were invested. Um, I do think that sometimes my are we talking about how they approach practice, or are we saying after a game my players didn't play hard or
I
didn't
would say more so the former rather than the latter, but it could also maybe creep into
yeah.
the latter as well.
um I'd say as a if I were speaking to a high school coach who coaches in a just a traditional public high school, that you're going to have athletes along a spectrum that are from really some super serious in love with the game to some more recreational, and you're going to have to learn to involve and envelop all of those into what you're trying to do. um, the you know I go back to, I'll repeat this again, not I won't belabor the point, but the worst teams that I was a part of, either as a player or a coach, were those where I could see players lose their spunk because they felt like their efforts and their role on the team was sort of determined for them by someone else and wasn't going to change no matter what. I've been on both sides of that as a player, where maybe in one sport I could do anything and I was going to start on Friday night in football. I could loaf. I was just talented at that sport, basketball. I was on the other side of that, athletic but not super skilled. So I was a backup until my senior year. And I can remember being on teams where no matter what, I just felt that nothing was going to change, and I can see how that would cause someone to become apathetic.
Mhm.
So I would challenge the coach to go look at their practices. By practices, I mean their habits and the way they're conducting business in their program, and make sure that a player doesn't feel like hopeless.
Mhm.
And with if I do see that my hustle, my effort, touching every line, finishing every drill, running all the way through the through the running all the way through to the end of the whistle, right? Like all of those hustle things and effort things are met with the rewards, then yeah, then I think you're more apt to have players stay bought in a little bit longer.
Yeah. I got 3 things kind of to that, but I'll try to keep it simple. First one I would say is keep things fresh with new
Yeah.
games and drills. And that doesn't mean you have to go out and constantly get new drills, but like slight variations or slightly switching up your small-sided games or the scoring that you do or but
I've got to
that
comment on that. I don't mean to interrupt, but
no,
like
go right ahead.
I hear that a lot from, and I coached in Texas. We got a lot of time with our players, a lot.
Mhm.
So they're like a lot. So there there was sort of like a need, like, man, this is kind
Mhm.
of boring. We're doing the same day. It's 115th day that we've been practicing, like
Hmm.
we're- um, but I speak to a lot of coaches who I hear, well, our players are bored and we need to mix things up. And they get like a week before their season and they're seeing nothing till this after. Like, how are they bored? Like, what? You barely work out. Like, what? So I don't know. Like, I don't know about that one. Sorry to I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying,
Yeah,
like, I don't know that you need to mix things up. Like, you barely even see each other. Like,
sure. I think maybe part of what because I have the long season as a college coach,
sure.
I'm thinking of if you're running the same 3 shooting games over and over and over, and you say, "We practice 20 minutes of shooting every single day,"
Yeah.
just expect your players to kinda lose focus on over time. So
Yeah.
whether that's just introducing this is a slight variation on it or that kinda thing. The avoiding I hope coaches don't hear this because we've had full episodes on this. It's not completely switching things up or changing
Hmm.
things or changing your philosophy or adding a whole new defense or
Yeah.
offensive system or but just I do think that like that competitive piece and how can you integrate that with, like I said, a new shooting game or something like that. But I do think you're right. There's also another extreme to that. If we're constantly changing things, you're probably not focusing on what you should, or
Yeah, I
maybe
don't
that could
know,
have some more thoughts
but
later on.
go on with your other points
Yeah.
of
Second one I would suggest is help them keep the big picture in mind.
mhm,
I'm thinking of even our team this week. We've got a Friday, Saturday game, and we're at the point in the semester where they're tired, they're ready for a Christmas break. They're, they're just worn out. They've got a lot of things
mhm,
going on at school, but helping them understand that this is a great week of games Friday, Saturday that would resemble a regional tournament or a national tournament. And the way that we prepare for something like this will help prepare us for when we get to that regional tournament or that national tournament. And I think helping them see how each piece is important maybe can help them refocus or understand that they need to handle something a certain way because it will be preparation for something that's to come in the future.
yeah,
And then the third one I have is kind of that point of just being, understanding, being aware, and being empathetic to how they're feeling. Um,
mhm,
I think I care about basketball more than they care about basketball, but I'm supposed to. But I need to understand that they are tired, that they have exams coming up, that it's been a long semester. And so I think that there's times where I maybe give them a little bit more leeway or I'm a little bit more understanding because it can be hard for coaches to put themselves in the place of a player because that was a long
yeah,
time ago. And we can sometimes lose touch with that because we are 20, 30, 40 years removed.
yeah. That's a that being empathetic to the player and trying to um, see it from their perspective is tough. Like I have a little phrase that I've used with coaches who have expressed frustrations like the one you have on the screen now is don't expect you from other people.
Mhm.
Meaning like you're a basketball nut junkie, you know, crazed, obsessed. So you expect that from other people.
Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah.
There's probably more that we could talk about. Maybe some of the things that we brought up, we can talk more about and dig into a little bit later on.
Okay.
But kind of nearing the end of our time. Before we let people go, we are in the middle of the season, and I know a lot of
Mhm.
coaches have taken advantage of your RAMP program, the program that we mentioned earlier. If people don't know about that, can you tell them about what you do with coaches and then how they can potentially access you or access that program?
Yeah, I just sort of serve as a sounding board and an advisor, not just X's and O's, but data analytics, just some of the things we talk about just today, just sort of like giving guidance to coaches and you know, a lot of X's and O's, but not just that. And I'd say I've with most of my clientele, I've been where they are as far as coaching and now make myself available to just serve alongside them. I'd say that's the best way to describe it. They can just reach out to me, Randy at radiusathletics.com, and I'll fill them in.
Randy has a lot of great resources that if you're not familiar with what he does with that RAMP program or the newsletters that he has, be sure to email him to get a piece of all of those. You'll be a better coach for it. Thanks to all of you who joined us this week. If you missed any part of the live show, you can go back and watch on YouTube. Just simply search Hoops Forum or Radius Athletics there on Randy's page. You'll find the full version of the interview. Or if you're more inclined to listen, go to any podcast platform and search a quick timeout, and there you'll find the full audio version of the show. For Randy Sherman, I'm Tony Miller. We'll talk to you again next time on Hoops Forum.